Thomas here with ForReel Movie News and Reviews. As part of our Sundance 2021 coverage, one of the films I am really excited to experience at the festival is called Coming Home in the Dark, a crime thriller from New Zealand making its world premiere at the festival on Saturday, January 30th. I'm here with the sound design team, McKay and Matt Lambourn, to talk about their work on the film, which I'm told relies less on the music and more on the sound. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Tom.
So, full disclosure, I have not seen the movie yet, but I do have my space reserved for that world premiere screening on Saturday, and I am super excited to check it out with everyone else.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you guys are a part of POW Studios, right? Which is where you guys have been able to lend your work and expertise to many notable films, some of which are Peter Jackson projects, right? That a lot of people will recognize. Can you tell us a little bit about POW Studios? About POW Studios, the kinds of projects you guys take on, and maybe even talk about some of the things you guys have worked on personally in the past?
Well, POW Studios came about, Thomas, in 2015, when after working on one of the big movies, there can be quite a hiatus, so up to a year. And so we basically joined forces, and Matt, myself, and Jason Canovas, to directly go and hunt for our own work rather than waiting for work to come to us. And initially, we focused on work out of Asia, and we've done up to 3 Chinese films and a Korean project, along with local work that we have worked on. Also, on the last while, Jason Canovas, he was a supervising dialogue editor on Mortal Engines and The Last Hobbit. So we have a mix of the really, really big stuff down to really, really small stuff. So, but essentially, POW was formed to create a team approach. We felt by collaborating together, we could have a far more powerful offering. We could cover the whole gamut rather than just part of a soundtrack. We can do everything right through to final mixing. So that was the intention in 2015.
And that's right. And in New Zealand, there was a long period when everyone that worked in sound on a movie was their own little business, competing against everyone else who was also their own little business. And that meant that you're your own agent, you're your own accountant, you're your own hustler, you're your own administrator, and sometimes you might get to do a bit of sound design. We thought that joining together as the company and people focusing on their strengths and taking the lead in different projects from time to time meant that we all got to do as much as what we loved as we could on every movie.
Very cool. I mean, that sounds like a really great strategy to approach it from, and it seems like it's been working for you guys really well.
Yes, basically in the diversity of work that we've done, and we do more work than we could do individually. So we also employ at times up to 4 people helping us as well. And it's been so satisfying to see younger people come through and their skill level increase. And by having a range of work and having quite a lot of work, we can actually utilize, essentially apprentices and assistants who have now come through and becoming full-fledged sound editors, which is actually one of the most satisfying things about it.
And just to jump in there on what John's saying, we've actually expanded to include picture editorial and color and VFX as well. And for me personally, it's a perfect opportunity to blow my own trumpet and tell how important sound is from those early stages. And we've got one young filmmaker who's put a film through us, and he just said to me one day that he feels like he's got this fantastic secret that some other young filmmakers don't realize, that sound can actually do a lot more than you expect. It's not just something to put to the picture, and that was a really good feeling that day.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. I do really appreciate the work that and the effect that sound has in movies, and I don't think people appreciate it enough, just because when it's done so well, it's not noticeable in a sense. I mean, does that make sense? Where when you do your job so well, it's so integrated that it's something that people don't appreciate enough. So
absolutely, because that's an area that sound has, is that you cannot close your ears. And so you can subtly manipulate people when they think they're seeing something horrible or something lovely. I like to do horrible sound effects, that's why I say that. When they're seeing something really emotive or effective, or when they're hearing it rather, they think they're seeing it. They say, wow, that movie looked amazing, but what it was actually affecting them was some subtle sound effect or some unsubtle sound effect that can creep in and almost change what they're seeing. That's the really interesting psychological aspect of sound for me.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and a really great thing to note. Um, with you with you enjoying doing that more awful sound effect thing, I imagine Coming Home in the Dark was a project that you really enjoyed doing.
Yes, it was. I should mention that I did do a few horrors before this, one of which is pretty well known, called 30 Days of Night, David Slade's
Yes.
wonderful vampire movie. I was lucky enough to get the violence in all of that. So all the head chops, all the vampire rips, all the, the brutality and cruelness in that, which I loved at the time. And that's where I, to use a horrible pun, that's where I cut my teeth on violent sound effects, and that was really carried through into Coming Home. I didn't take such a hands-on approach for that, more the creative direction for the film, and let some of our younger sound editors have a go at that, because it's a sought-after job, cutting violent sound effects, because for some reason everyone likes to do it.
That's funny. John, do you have the same affinity for horror kind of sound effect editing?
Well, the very first movie I ever did in 1984 was a horror movie called Death Warmed Up, where I had to put an axe in someone's stomach. So I have to say that both Matt and I are actually sort of pacifists and very gentle people, but violence in films is, it is so powerful. It can be, powerfully done. And especially in Coming Home, quite a lot of the violence, one whole scene is really, the violence is seen on the people observing it. And I always think the sound of violence is more violent than seeing it. And I think there's one scene in Coming Home that epitomizes that. And it increases because the imagination of what's going on is greater than actually the visual. And I learned early on that also I did a film in the late 80s called Kitchen Sink, which is a classic New Zealand short film made by Alison McLean. And it was completely shot mute. And it was about pulling up something out of a kitchen sink that turned into a creature. Without sound, it was unemotional and it didn't connect you. Sound basically is that interior line and the emotional line of a film, whereas without it, pictures can just be pictures and they don't have that emotive impact. So and Coming Home, which is such an atmospheric sort of thriller, and it is based, it's out in the elements, so it's very elemental. So sound is such the weirdest thing about it is that sometimes you just don't know what works. You put two things together and they work. They suddenly create this energy between them. And that's what I think keeps me going in the business, because it's surprising. It can even surprise, always that it's like cooking up something new every time a little bit, even though you're using elements will think will work.
Yeah, that's right. Just to jump in there, is I've always loved the phrase, the day I stop learning will be the day I stop breathing, because there's always something new to discover in sound. And that's what's so brilliant about having this team approach, is that told all your wonderful secrets to, then they'll go off and play as well, and they'll come up with something brilliant themselves. And it's a wonderful sense of achievement for the whole company. When someone makes a discovery like that, and then that becomes your library, it goes into your library of tricks that you can use next time, until someone else comes up with another thing.
That's so awesome.
That's what keeps me going. Yeah.
Like I almost want to sit and watch a movie that you guys do the sound design for, and just listen to your editorial about how those sounds came into effect, or what made you do what decisions in the sound editing. There's a lot to this, and it would be so cool to have a mystery science theater, I guess, kind of setting where you guys talk through your decision making in the sound design. Um,
Yeah.
so as I kind of mentioned, coming home, it seems within your guys' wheelhouse. What was the most challenging part of this particular film in designing the sound?
Like I've always found really good films quite straightforward. You know, like and the film really spoke to us. One of the most challenging things I was, you know, 40 minutes of it is in a car. You know, it's just traveling. So how to keep that interesting, how to keep the emotion going, and keep the subtle shifts and changes that were happening in the drama to be reflected in the car. The car is really like the fifth character because they're in it for so long, and to keep that interesting and not boring. And Matt did a lot of work on how to keep interest in the car, and we've come down to it. It's not all about engines. You know, this is the thing that really came home to in this, is that it's about the rattle, it's about the wind, it's about the little subtle shifts, what we call negative sounds almost now. You know, modern cars are so quiet that it's almost the sense of the movement of the car, and also making it dramatic from the changes and perspective and stuff like that. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is to keep that little shift.
That's right. And New Zealand is, sorry to jump in there, John. New Zealand is known as being a place of landscape. I mean, everyone's seen Lord of the Rings and so on, and seen those big dramatic landscapes, which are, I can't deny, they're very beautiful, but they can also be extremely unforgiving. Every year, tourists and locals actually, who go for a walk in the bush or a swim in the sea and just disappear and are never heard from again. And that happens a couple of times every year because people think it's a land full of hobbits and it's all friendly and kind and lovely and so on.
That was my impression for a while.
It's many people's impression, and it's wild, and it can be quite dangerous. And to sell that in the landscape, and to contrast that with being in the car, and do you actually want to be out in the landscape, or are you safer in the car? And weighing up that balance, that is a challenge, because there's nothing more boring. Everyone's been on a long road trip than just listening to the engine humming along. That's why people take music and your iPods along on your road trips and plug them in. And so it's about actually being able to sell the sound of that landscape and your wish to be out in it, and also its sense of foreboding while you're in the car.
Well, and another point really is also, the main, threat and the villain, shall we say, they come out of the landscape. They're just this family are just having a picnic out, having a they go for a walk in the bush, which they've planned to go walk into this wild area as a family outing, and out of this landscape walk to two guys who have actually come from one of the characters' past. And what I like about the film is that it subtly blends past and present. The past collides with one of the characters' present, which comes to unveiling a secret from the past, which unravels everything. So I'm not going to give away any secrets, but that's what I like about it. It slowly develops over time, and how these characters and how you view them, and how it's shifting all the time. The landscape reflects how the characters are revealing themselves. So yeah, the interplay of atmosphere down to even Foley, which was I never known a flap of a guy's coat to be as ominous. Even little things like that. Use every last thing. And one of the keys I think we found was giving weight to everything meant that no one knew where the threat was coming from. If you have simple sounds that you go, why am I hearing all that? We didn't we didn't try and manipulate the audience. We kept on trying to throw them off kilter. So the simple things are just there all the time. Little rattles, or in one gruesome scene, the guy's going in and outside of a shop area, and a bell, this innocuous bell keeps on going off. You just hear all the time, and it becomes quite scary, because you go, it's out of balance. And that was I think, don't you think, Matt, that was, I think, the key for what we were trying to do.
That's right. There's equal weight given to the mundane sound effects, such as a flapping newspaper stand, or as John said, the door alarm at a gas station. While there's a horrific brutality going on. And it's almost like the world keeps going and you can't stop this awful force that's happening to people. And to just jump in on your question about what was the most challenging, I think for me, it was the scariness of the subject matter. I've got children. I won't be taking them on a picnic for the next couple of months, just because of the scariness of what happens there. But once you get past that, it really is, it's showing New Zealand as this beautiful wild place, but also extremely dangerous and ominous as well.
That's awesome. And the more that you guys talk about this, the more excited I get. And I hope anyone who watches this is feeling that same excitement level, because I do really love these kind of like thriller, suspense, mystery kind of films. And it's incredible how much control you guys as the sound designers have over that experience, which is amazing. One of the things that I think also helps control the mood of a movie is the music. I mean, you guys mentioned Lord of the Rings, which is, by the way, my favorite movies of all time. Those movies are phenomenal. But one of the main reasons is because of how well the music is done, how well the sound is done. The combination of that really works. When it comes to music, do you find it easier or harder to do your job with the score, without a score? How does that process work in relationship to music, or maybe the absence of?
I might leap in on this one. I've worked with John Gibson, the composer. My first work was in the early 90s, and he comes from a theatre background, so it's not highly technical music. It was very simple but atmospheric, and it gave a lot of space for us to work in. And he knew it's sort of like the music was only really as a key into emotional tone at certain points, but there's not a lot of it. And we had the music early on. We actually even pre-mixed the music as well. So we could balance everything against music. So the music and the sound really work in with each other really well. I've been on movies where you get the music really late, things clash, people are doubling up on whatever, but we had a very good conversation early on. I met with John Gibson and James Ashcroft, the director, in Auckland, where they were based, and we were based in Wellington. And so we knew what was coming. We totally knew everything where the music score was going to work. And I knew early on that we had to do quite a lot of heavy lifting, because we were going to be doing a lot of what was termed music. I always think it's just a soundtrack, It's not music and sound effects and dialogue, it's a soundtrack. The more it seems like it's coming from one, and when we were talking before, when, no one really notices the sound, they shouldn't. They should just feel it. It's a whole
That's right.
It's about feeling it.
As when it hits your ears, it's only one sound wave, one sound wave from the right, one sound wave from the left. So all that division into music and dialogue and atmos and Foley and ambience that's just something our brain tries to do to make sense of it. And speaking about there not being much music, I started 20 years ago. I did my degree, my undergraduate at university, hoping to become an orchestral composer and learning all the different colors of the orchestra and so on. I assumed I was going to become the next John Williams or Hans Zimmer or something like that. But then I did this course, in those days it was called electroacoustics. Now it's called sonic arts, where basically they say, here's a microphone, you go out and record stuff, anything in the world, not instruments, cars, rocks, rivers, clanging metal, trains, bring it back into the studio and make a composition out of that. And I mean, it's got a long history, that kind of music, but I'd never heard of it before. And suddenly this whole world opened up to me that actually everything's music and everything can be listened to in a musical way. So even though I don't think of sound effects as being the score or the music, I think of it in a musical way as having the tension and release and different colors and different bass and treble elements that can influence the audience that way. So to have a score that had relatively minimal music opened up that door again for me to sort of paint in a musical way, but using sound effects and sound design, which is it's actually my favorite thing to do.
That's awesome. And I guess I never really looked at it that way, but you make so much sense when it comes to like it's one sound wave going into your ears, and so it all works together, and that's a really cool thing that's going to really alter how I watch movies going forward, or maybe hear movies going forward. Um, so COVID is probably something that I'll address with most of the people I talk to, just because it has had such an effect on our world right now. I am interested in how COVID and restrictions or anything really how that affected how you guys were able to do your job in this movie.
I'll answer that one because like COVID hit just when we finished. So
that's very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, not fortunate. COVID's a really unfortunate thing, but like I'm happy that you're able to do your part of the movie before you were hampered by
Well,
that.
basically, we finished the final mix. We went to a dinner to celebrate the end of it. A week later, we were in lockdown. And I think the producers have managed, we got all the deliverables out, and then we turned off the lights for a while, And here in New Zealand, it just hit like a rocket. It was suddenly bingo overnight because we went for a very aggressive stance straight away and locked the whole country down so people couldn't come in. And for 6 weeks, we were all at home.
And that's an advantage to us because in post-production, wouldn't you say, John, sound editors in particular are very used to working in dark rooms with a closed door for weeks on end and never coming out and interacting with people and basically living like cavemen. So that kind of lockdown and that kind of isolation was bearable. It's not our first thing, but
it's been a degree our norm. So, and we could also carry on working. We can work remotely, all those issues. But New Zealand's been quite lucky because we're 3,000 miles from Australia. We're an island nation. We can control our borders, and we've just seen the sickening things that are happening overseas, especially in the US, UK, and Europe, and all that. And production has been back up and running here for some months. So and quite a lot of American productions are down here at the moment shooting stuff. So like Avatar is in Wellington, the Lord of the Rings TV is in Auckland. So New Zealand's actually really pumping in terms of production.
Well, I'm happy to hear that New Zealand was able to handle that constructively and really get control on it, because as you said, it's a struggle over here in the States, and we're kind of relying on this vaccine that's going out to hopefully start helping with controlling the situation. So I'm happy that you guys are getting back to normal and still able to work, and we're able to get through that relatively constructively. But with COVID, we will be watching this from home because Sundance is happening remotely. What do you recommend for tuning your TV settings to optimize the sound for this movie and movies in general?
I would say if you have the opportunity to play it through your stereo system rather than just through the TV speaker, that's then do anything you can to do that. People are putting out sound bars have been out for a while, which make an interesting difference. There's also talk of Apple designing the HomePod, which purportedly, I've never had the pleasure of listening to one, but purportedly it's just a little box you can put in the corner and it analyzes your room and everything comes through sounding like it's surround. So there are those options to go through, but I would say if you've got a decent set of stereo speakers, then you're 90% better than you were before.
Well, yes, and most modern television sets, the audio is appalling. I'm actually on holiday vacation here on an island, and the people were so proud of their new TV screen, and it has the worst audio possible. And I spent my whole holiday trying to tune it to get it better. Has no, at the bottom end there's nothing there. There's no bite in it. It's just got no dimension, and it's just, yeah, it's driving me nuts.
In the old days, TVs used to be in a great big wooden cabinet, right? Built like a speaker, so they sounded like a speaker. Now they're just this tiny little flat thing that can't make a sound.
Yeah, I think people are missing out. Like we did this in 5.1 surround, of course, but they're missing the experience a little bit, but not going to the cinemas. And that's the worst thing about this period here. We've been lucky also here in New Zealand. We're back in cinemas, you know, and we're back with live performances. I was at a live performance in the weekend of a comedian, you know. So, you know, we're enjoying those experiences, but the cinema experience, I just don't think can be replicated at home. You know, that's what we're all missing in this COVID time. I'm sure you just can't. You know, our work is reliant on really good replay in many ways. It's driven me mad for 40 years. I've done a film, mixed it, gone to the premiere and go, you know, it's sort of the cinemas don't replay it as well as mixing theaters. Cinemas have got better, but, you know, yeah, it's always been a continual battle with sound.
And on that note, and for many other reasons, Godspeed. We really wish you the best in COVID recovery there, Thomas, because all our media comes as, I don't know if it's represented or not, but it's just shock after shock after shock. Mm-hmm. So all the best, mate.
I really appreciate that. Yes, thank you so much for that. We'll hopefully start recovering and getting the situation better. Hopefully in the near future. Fingers crossed, right? Yeah, you guys, I could sit here and talk to you guys all day, right? This has been a wonderful conversation. I do want to go ahead and draw it to a close, though. I think we're coming up on our half hour. Just really quickly, is there anything that you guys can say about any projects you're currently working on or things you have coming up?
Yes, we're about to start a Chinese animated film called Young Lion Dancer, for a company that we did a wonderful animated film in 2018 called Kung Fu. So it's the second film we've done with this director. We enjoy doing, really enjoy doing animation projects because they're so reliant on sound. And our last project, all the characters were food and all the landscape was food items or vegetables. And so that was quite a challenge. And so again, we're looking forward to a wonderful challenge there. So we're starting that next month for finishing in July. And we have some other more television type projects coming up as well. And some sonic arts projects that Matt has been working on during the whole COVID. You know, people said, oh, we have to pivot your business a bit. So we decided to actually utilize our dramatic audio skills by creating a GPS location-specific sound app. So Matt has mapped several sculptures in the city with sound and created soundscapes. So we're looking at doing further work with that as well. So
our idea is that you can put on your headphones and go to a specific place anywhere on the GPS map, anywhere in the world, and hear an alternative soundtrack, whether it be the history of the area or the future, perhaps, of the area, or anything that anyone can dream up. So that's an exciting project for us.
The genius of that came really about because, like, when lockdown happened, suddenly all the birds came back and the traffic disappeared, and we went, that's cool, can't we have that? And of course, all that wonderful quiet disappeared, you know, as soon as we got back to sort of normal.
Yeah, well, that's great. That sounds like a wonderful project, and if it makes its way over here to the States, I'm looking forward to experiencing that. It sounds like a great challenge for you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. This has been a pleasure, and I'm really happy we had this conversation. So John and Matt are a part of the sound design team for the movie Coming Home in the Dark, which has its world premiere, as I mentioned, on Saturday, January 30th. Check for ticket availability online at festival.sundance.org. And if there is availability, make sure you get your tickets soon so that they don't sell out. But cool, guys. Thanks again for chatting, and thanks to everyone for watching and listening. And until next time, keep it for real.